that ask for commissions is now in there, maybe along with closing costs. You now get to rework those numbers to see what's the best way to make it work for yourself and possibly the client as well too, so that you end up with the result you're looking for. So I wouldn't say that they're coming down. I would honestly just say that it just gives you more of an opportunity to make them work.
All right, folks, I got a great one for you this week. We have a returning guest here to the show, a good friend, Calvin Shropshire out of Chattanooga. Or I think you're in Chattanooga. I know you're in multiple cities now. Originally out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. A high producer, very successful team. And we're going to touch on the topic that people are talking about a lot right now, which is what has been the impact. What are the best practices? What are the approach people are taking to this NAR settlement changes, right? I think a lot of folks are curious about that. They want more information. They want more training. They want, to hear what top producers are doing to adapt to these changes. And who better than friend of the show here, Calvin. Welcome, Calvin. For the people that might not be familiar with you, right, from previous appearances, why don't you give us a quick intro of who you are, tell us about your team, and where you guys are at right now. Go for it, Calvin.
Been in the industry technically since 2005. Got out in 2007. Wasn't doing so well with real estate. Ended up doing some work that was more geared towards my background, which is IT. And then ended up getting back into real estate 2012. Left my full-time job 2014, started my team in 15, and started my brokerage in 2020, I believe it was. So still have the team. That's essentially my bread and butter. And I'm a big part of the transactions on that. Father of 7, husband.
Oh, wow.
So definitely motivated every day.
So you're like big teams, period. Like you're like team. Everything is team. You're doing small, Calvin. Nothing small.
That's right. But we've always been one of the top producing teams. I will say, since being a broker, because I wear so many hats now, we've slowed down a little bit, but we still stay consistent. More than 91% of our business is listings.
Love it.
We stay pretty consistent with that.
I love that. I love that. What's that?
I was gonna say we're more like a Navy SEAL team. We're a team under 5 people, and we currently hold about 28 listings right now.
Love it. So high producing, very productive. A team, very listing focused team. So now I'm super interested, right? Because I think a lot of folks focus on the buyer agency agreement and buyers and on our settlement. I think one of the most important conversations happens on the listing side when we're talking about these changes, right? Because I think the seller needs to be aware, they need to understand what their options are, and they need to I think the way we say things matters, right? The words matter. And so tell us, Calvin, what if anything have you guys done differently when you're talking to sellers? And you guys work with some buyers, like when you talk to your clients, when we're thinking about the NAR settlement, because I'll set the table for the discussion. The industry, let's not mix words. There's been a lot of fear around these changes. There's been a lot of anxiety around these changes. I think if you were to poll agents, the conventional wisdom was, oh no, we're going to make way less money. Like, this is going to be bad for real estate agents. This is not good for real estate agents. We're being forced to implement these changes, and oh my goodness, this is going to be bad for us, right? So I'd say I'd call that a really common approach or reaction to the NAR settlement changes. I think so, but is that necessarily true? What have you guys seen? How do you guys talk to your clients when it comes to this topic?
So it hasn't changed for us. The reason it hasn't is because this is what I've always taught, especially on the buyer side. I have technically maybe with a friend or family member, I've shown a property without a buyer's rep agreement, but I've always had a buyer's rep agreement with anyone I didn't know. And so it's just been the same business for us as usual. I think what I've seen more of is, well, what we're encountering more of is we're just having to explain how this lawsuit has affected the relationship between the agent and the consumer. But for the most part, business has been the same. I will say we're seeing a lot more people list because of the changes, right?
Interesting.
We're seeing a lot more buyers go to the listing agent. We are seeing that. We're seeing a lot more buyers come to
unrepresented buyers.
We are seeing a little bit more unrepresented buyers, but again, what comes into play there is how you explain these changes to them. I'm seeing a lot more people come to open houses, right? Because what you have to have a rep, some sort of agreement signed with a buyer now to show them. So I'm seeing them show up at more open houses even before they get representation. But as far as business, nothing's really changed because this is how we operated prior to these lawsuits. The only thing that we've changed is our conversation with the seller. We're explaining to people, hey, listen, the option to pay a buyer's agent commission or to offer that concession to a buyer is it's always been negotiable, but it's even more so now, just like closing costs. And Mr. Seller, what it has now allowed you to do is the opportunity to sit down and see how to make the numbers work in your favor so that you come out at the net that you initially wanted to come out with in the end. Right. So
I got you.
So yeah. No, and as far as the buyers though, it's having that conversation with them. Hey, the crazy thing is in this industry, we make doctor money, we make attorney money, but we don't treat it as such. And I talk to so many agents who are so afraid to tell their buyer, like, hey, you have to hire me. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, what we do, I agree. I agree. There's a lot of anxiety around that conversation. I've heard agents describe it as, oh, I feel dirty. I saw it. I swear to God, an agent said, I feel dirty having that conversation. When you say it that way, I mean, it's obvious. If you want to be a professional, all professionals have to have that conversation with clients. All professionals. But I think the change is big because you could be for so long, you could be a buyer agent in the industry, specifically buyer agent, because most agents start there. And you might have never had that conversation ever in your life. It's possible, right? You might have never had that conversation. Hey, Mr. Buyer, I'm a professional. This is what I do. This is how much I expect to get paid. And these are the circumstances that I'm going to try and get it from here. But this is how much I make because I'm a professional. That conversation, if you're on the listing side, if you're 91% listings, you have that conversation every day, right? Like that's your job, to have that conversation and convince people, because there are other professionals trying to get that business from you, right? There are other ones, and some of them want to compete on price. Let's be honest. Some of them want to compete on price. On the buyer side, now it's a lot more equal. Like it's a lot more similar to that listing side where you've always had to have that conversation. I'm Calvin. This is what I do. This is how much it's worth to you, right? And this is why it's worth that to you. This is why you should hire me at that price. There's someone that charges way less. Yeah, I know. You get what you pay for, right? So what do you think? I mean, that is pretty common. I think, but why do you think agents have that reaction, that fear? And what, if anything, would you say to those folks, right?
Well, again, it comes down to professionalism and knowledge. I think the one thing that sets us apart from most agents is that we're knowledgeable. We're educated. And when you're educated and you know what you're talking about, you're confident, right?
Yeah.
It's that simple. The more knowledge you have, the more confident you are. So I feel like to answer your question, the reason people are so afraid to have that conversation is because, one, they're not knowledgeable. And then two, they don't know what their value proposition is, right? If you don't feel you offer any value, then you're going to have that conversation. I sit here, it's interesting. I had a seller reach out to me yesterday for a $1.1 million property. And it felt good, as I was telling my wife, it felt good to be in the position to decide if I want to take that property. And I'm still thinking about it. He messaged me this morning and said, "Hey, did you decide on if you want to move forward with my listing?" Or I said, "I'm still looking at the numbers to make sure it makes sense for both of us." Um, then saying he was perfectly fine with our commission, all that stuff. But again, I'm not in the business of listing properties. I'm in the business of selling them. And
Yeah.
so if we're not on the same page when it comes to pricing the home and whatnot, sometimes I won't take them.
Got
Now,
it.
so again, but I know that our value, right?
Yeah.
And same thing with a buyer. If I'm going to set foot in my car and show you properties and take time away from my family, I want to make sure that you have hired me to do the job that you're expecting me to do, not that we're on some sort of buddy system. Because at the end of the day, it's business.
Yeah.
So the one thing I always recommend, and this is what we've always done since I started the team in 2015, we do buyers presentations.
Mhm.
It's another thing. Show them what the process looks like. Educate them. We treat it like a doctor's office. We try to understand exactly what their symptoms are so we can give them the best prescription. What are they working with? Are they struggling with down payment? Are they struggling with, different types of financing options? Are they struggling with um, maybe having to sell a home and get into a new home at the same time? Treat it like a doctor's office. Ask questions. Go through the process of what it looks like to purchase a home in today's market, and then figure out what solutions are going to be best for them. When you can show that value, that conversation is not hard. I promise.
That's
It's not
I
hard at
got
all.
you. Yeah. And and there's even, I because I'm on the forums, every day. I'm talking to agents every day. And there's even been a little bit of cynicism now when people bring up the term value. Oh, you're going to talk about value. That doesn't mean anything. Everything's about price. And one thing I like to call out is exactly what you're saying, Calvin. If you remove value from the equation, the only thing you have is price, right? Because if
Mm-hmm.
you commoditize yourself, if you self commoditize to that level, think like a consumer. If all you guys are the same, then of course I'm going to go with the cheapest one. That'd be the rational decision to make,
Sure.
right? However, that's not always the case. That's not always the case. The rational decision isn't to go with the cheapest option, right? The rational decision is to go with the most valuable option, the ones that's going to make you the most money, the ones that's going to be the better experience, right? So I think agents can lose sight of that, and they can, it's a lack of confidence, it's a lack of professionalism, might even be like a lack of training, and I think a lot of agents are the ones that are reacting the most viscerally to this are the ones that I really feel, being real right now, that they lack value. They actually believe it, right? So when someone comes with a change like this, they're saying, "Oh, the jig is up." Like, we've been caught, guys. What? Let's not let's work around this. Let's find some bizarre workaround to this system. Let's keep things the way they were, because how can we possibly operate in a world where we're having those conversations every day? And that's kind of, it's kind of shocking to me. Like, what, really? Like, that's your solution to like, put your head in the sand and kind of forget about that? Or why don't we just, dust ourselves off a little bit and go, missed, because that's what we, as agents, that's our biggest advantage we have. There's a reason Zillow doesn't run real estate right now, right? There's a reason Redfin doesn't dominate the market. We own that relationship with the client, right? It is such an important purchase that belly to belly, face to face conversation still wins. Like, that's why real estate agents still exist. So we should kind of lean into that, right?
Right.
Instead of finding ways, kind of around that. But Kelvin, I think we're on the same page. I think I agree with you with what you're saying 100%. How do you handle these objections? I think a lot of agents, they get stumped, right? You guys deal with a lot of sellers. What happens if a seller tells you this? I've heard this happen in real life. Calvin, I heard on the news that commissions are coming down. Right? I mean, quite frankly, the president said it. Right? Said, hey, there was an accomplishment of his. Real estate commissions are finally going to come down. Calvin, that's my expectation. How do we make it happen? Because I'm hearing on the news that that's like a thing, right? A seller comes to you with that expectation. How do you counter that? How do you push back on that?
Well, so first I'm going to dive deeper into it. I'm going to ask them the question. I'm curious. So you said commissions are coming down. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? When you say commissions are coming down, in what aspect, what capacity? Because, and
And
the reason I say that is
yeah,
because I know when they're thinking about commissions coming down, my thought process is we're now not offering the buyer's agent commission up front. Now, keep this in mind. We have several under contract, quite a few. All the sellers are still paying buyer's agent commissions, right? So, but I want to understand their thought process first. So I'm going to ask more questions. Hey, I'm curious, when you say buyer's agent commissions are coming down and you've heard this, can you elaborate more on what that means to you?
I got you. You know, and I think a lot of sellers are like, well, you know, that's what I've heard. You know, I've heard on the news. You know, my friend told me, oh, if you're going to list, don't forget that the NAR settlement means you're going to have to pay less. So don't forget you're going to pay less. So pay less, right? So it's just coming from the narrative. I heard this narrative, Calvin, and I've heard it, and you want to make sure we don't forget that that's a thing, right? Like we don't have to pay a buyer agent commission anymore, right? Like that. They might approach it from that perspective. I heard you don't have to pay that anymore. Is that true?
So, and what I tell everyone is it comes down to what you feel most comfortable with, right? So, similar to like closing costs, you now have the ability to, and keep in mind, commissions have always been negotiable. A lot of people didn't realize that, but they've always been negotiable. Now, Mr.
100%.
Seller, when you get that offer and that ask for commissions is now in there, maybe along with closing costs, you now get to rework those numbers to see what's the best way to make it work for yourself and possibly the client as well too, so that you end up with the result you're looking for. So I wouldn't say that they're coming down. I would honestly just say that it just gives you more of an opportunity to make them work.
Okay. I like that. Words matter, right? Words
Absolutely.
matter. The way we say this to clients matters a lot. I think it matters a lot. And Calvin, you know, you guys have a lot of listings, you have a lot of deals under contract. Have you seen buyer agents behave differently? Have you seen the change on their end? Have you seen anything that they're doing differently to work with these changes? Are they getting smarter? Are they learning how to work this system to make sure they get paid? And that on the other end, for you guys, the seller gets paid. At the end of the day, that's really what should matter to them. Are you seeing that buyer agents are adapting? Are you having to kind of teach them, walk them through this process? What have you seen?
You know, that's a great question as well too. So getting a call there. So that's a great question too. For a while, I was getting good buyers agents that we have in our listings now. Please don't call me and ask me if we're offering seller concessions. Or don't ask me if we're offering buyers agent commission. I'm just going to tell you to please put whatever you're asking for in the offer, right? Just like you wouldn't call me and say, "Is your seller paying closing costs?" Right?
You know,
why
how much
would you
money are they? Are they going to give me money on the inspection? How much have you?
Right.
Have you guys
You're not
decided how
going
much
to
you
call me and
concede?
ask me that, so please don't do me that. At the end of the day, put it in with your offer, and we will sit down with a net sheet and figure out how to make it work. The one property I countered back, I put 3 different options in there for the buyer, and they ended up selecting option B, right? And it worked for both the buyer and the seller, right? So that's the other part of it too. How creative are you getting with your clients to help them get to the finish line? So
100%.
as an agent, but as far as with buyers agents, honestly, outside of them calling me to ask if the seller's offering a commission, no, it's still been the same.
Gotcha.
I just think it's now we're now having to actually talk to our clients and educate them. You know, we have to show them our value. We have to differentiate ourselves and show them what is our unique selling proposition. What sets us apart from all these other agents who are in the industry. So, you know, I had to correct a lady yesterday because an agent had mentioned to her, she said, "Oh, homes just don't sell during the wintertime." You know, she said, "Well, we're just gonna probably have to wait till spring." And she said, "Well, homes, you know, my agent told me that homes don't sell in the wintertime." And I just asked her, I was curious. I was like, "Where did your agent get that information from?" She's like, "Well, that's what she said." I was like, "Well, did she show you any data?" And she said, "Well, no." I said, "Well, would you be open-minded to maybe meeting with me for 15, 20 minutes if I could show you data that may show you something different?" They signed the paperwork yesterday.
There you
Now,
go.
here's the funny thing is that homes actually sell for a little bit higher during the wintertime because inventory is lower. And when I showed her that, we ended up getting the listing over her friend. She's like, "Well, yeah, she didn't even provide me with any information." So that's, again, that comes down to being knowledgeable and understanding what they're trying to accomplish and what's the best way to get them the prescription that's going to benefit them the most, right? They had a deadline to try to be in Florida by the beginning of the summer, but they were so afraid to put their home on the market now because of that statement, which had no data to back it up, that homes don't sell in the wintertime. So
No,
I don't know.
that's crazy. That's crazy. And I think I love what you mentioned, right? That you kind of did the buyer, and that transaction you mentioned, you did the buyer agent a little bit of a favor and said, "Hey, I'll give you option. There's more than one way to skin this cat. There's more than one way." I actually did a webinar, a couple of weeks ago with a lender, and we went over 10 ways to cover a commission gap. Where the buyer agency number might be different than what the seller would like to offer. So how can we get creative and cover that gap, right? So there's more than one way. There's more than one way. So you actually wrote it down and said, "Hey, there's more than one way." And yes. Calvin, I'm gonna say something that might get me in trouble, but this part of this negotiation, this part of the process, I think a lot of agents struggle with it because I think a lot of agents struggle with math. We can get 3% out of every number known to man. We can. We're like that. We know that math. But anything other than that, agents can struggle with it. But you know what? You got to get over that. That's not an excuse. You got to figure it out. This is not hard. This is not, this is not software, right? You don't have to go, right. Go get your BS, right? No. This is figuring out how to make those numbers work. Because when you have a listing agent like you on the other end, like we can make this work. We just have to find a way to make the numbers work, because at the end of the day, the seller wants to maximize their net, like anyone would. It doesn't mean you're not going to get paid. It doesn't mean you shouldn't get paid. As an agent, I 100%, agree with you on that one. And Kevin, let's switch gears a little bit here. So, nationally, right? Especially, in parts of the South, Southeast, the market is cooling. It's a little bit more of a balanced market than we saw. I don't know what's happening, in Tennessee and that part of the country. But if you look at Florida, Gulf Coast, Texas, we have in some parts of South Florida 100% more inventory than a year ago. Double the inventory. It was very low a year ago. It's way less low now, right? You've got a little bit of a shifty market, a little bit more of a still a seller's market by any measure, but more balanced than it was a year ago. What are you guys seeing? And you guys are carrying 28 listings, and we're almost in October. What are you guys doing, to really kill it with those listings? I'd love to hear if you're willing to share any one of those nuggets.
Well, the first thing, I think that first part you just mentioned goes back to the amount of inventory, and that's because buyers are uncertain, right? They don't know, they don't have a good GPS in place to figure out how to make their next move, how to get from point A to point B. So again, that comes down to offering solutions, sitting down, understanding their scenario. So as far as that part goes, what I've found is when we get an opportunity to speak to a buyer, we're typically able to get them to make a move, of course, when they feel comfortable, but usually it's a lot sooner than later once they understand their options, right?
Yes.
So, like, for example, there's 11 different ways in our area to get 100% financing. I'll tell you, 99% of agents don't know that.
Wow.
Wow. Sit down with them. Hey, if they're paying rent, what does their rent look like in comparison to a mortgage? Right? Explaining to them at the end of the day, you're still paying a mortgage. Just, do you want to pay yours or do you want to pay someone else's? Right? So from the buyer side of it, and then helping them understand this is an opportunity in some cases because there's more inventory available and sitting longer. Sellers are willing to work with them a little bit more. And we sometimes will ask them this question too. Hey, I'm curious, were you around in 2021, 2022 when interest rates were extremely low? And sometimes, a lot of times they'll say yes. I'm like, well, what was that like? They're like, well, we kept getting beat out. We kept having to go over asking price.
It was insane.
All right. So would it make sense now to marry the house and date the rate? Meaning you can get the house now, maybe at a more reasonable price, maybe at a higher interest rate. Of course, we're going to try to see if we can negotiate maybe a 2-1 or 3-1 buy down or something to help you out that rate for a little bit. But here's the thing. If the rates go down lower, you get to now refinance and not have to deal with the frenzy of people trying to get that same house that you already have. So you see,
100%.
But if you don't ask those questions, you don't know what their big hurdle is. As far as on the listing side of it, the flip side of that is, with all these people sitting on the fence, one, Mr. Seller, it gives us an opportunity to promote your house and talk to those buyers who are sitting on the fence. But as these interest rates are coming down, which is what most people are looking at, you want your house in a position that's on the market already, so that when those buyers are ready to make a move, yours is one of the first ones they look at.
Yeah. You don't want to list with everyone lists, right? As a seller, you don't want to be one of the 20 people that list. You want to be the first. You want to go first, right? I
Exactly.
love that.
So again, it just comes down to the conversation, but ultimately our goal is to prescribe them a prescription that is specific to their situation. And I know I keep talking about it like a doctor, but that's how we run our business. You don't come to me and tell me you're sick and just expect, like the gentleman yesterday, he said, I told him, hey, look, it may take me about 2.5, 3 weeks to put this home on the market. If I decide to take it, he's like, oh, you can't do it any sooner than that. I was like, well, would you say your home is like everyone else's? And he's like, no. He said no. And I said, okay, fantastic, great. We're on the same page. And we now understand that we need a unique marketing plan for your specific to your home, because it is not like everyone else's. And so our strategy is going to be a little bit different. And unfortunately, we don't just throw it on the market and expect something to happen. We want to make sure we're very strategic in how we promote this home. And he was just super impressed. He hadn't heard that from anyone else. You know,
I love that. Yeah,
and don't be afraid to walk away. And I explained, I was like, look, if you can't follow our process, which gets us the results that we've gotten, we're probably just not the best fit. And that's why he messaged me this morning and said, hey, did you decide if you wanted to take my house? You see, but
it's crazy.
It's different. It's not me. It's again treating it like a business, treating it like as a business owner would. If you go to an attorney,
a professional,
as a professional, you're right. And I know our value, and so that's why we're able to make those statements the way we do, because we have value and we offer value to all of our clients.
I love it. And Calvin, I'm going to put myself in there, because a lot of the people that watch this tend to be, a lot of them are newer agents. I know my audience, at least 50% of you guys, actually probably 50% at any given time, are relatively new agents, maybe a year, maybe less. What if they're, maybe they're agreeing with you. They're nodding their head like, Gus, Calvin, you guys are right. It does start with value. It starts with you believing in the value, number one, and then being able to convey that belief. How do I become a professional? Because I think, like I said before, the biggest issue is agents don't see themselves as valuable. Maybe agents don't see themselves as a professional. Well, how would you answer that? Calvin, I want to be a pro. I want to have that level of conversation like a physician would, like an attorney would. How do I become that pro? First, to me, so I could be that pro to the other client. What would you answer to that?
I'm going to give you something that's off subject. So I own a 25-foot jet boat. That's a 2022 brand new. I bought me a cheaper boat to learn how to boat for $5,000 before I bought this brand new one. And when I tell you guys, I was out there practicing nonstop to learn how to dock the boat, how to do certain things before I got good and comfortable enough to buy a brand new one, because I didn't want anyone else's problems. It's funny now when I dock that boat and I have people on there, I have people over the restaurant or something looking at me, I literally pull in and just drift in, just a couple of switches, turn it, and I'm right there. And I've had so many people come up to me and compliment me on how I dock that boat. It's the same thing.
Gotcha.
The way you learn and you become a professional is you get out there and you get in front of people. You call people, you talk to them. The more people you talk to and get in front of, the more situations you're going to encounter. And if you have a pretty good coach or a mentor or someone who's helping you, the more you're going to realize, okay, a lot of these scenarios are pretty consistent. I keep seeing the same thing over and over with different sellers. Your top 10 objections with some sellers, your top 10 objections with buyers. But the more you get in front of them, the more opportunities you have to be that professional and that problem solver through experience. I always tell people, you can't, like my friend, he has a different boat, and he was like, I don't know how you do that. He's like, I've watched you over and over again, and you just do it so well. And I'm like, well, you're never going to learn if you keep watching me.
100%. And for the people watching this, this is good to inform yourself and to motivate yourself. You're not going to get better by watching this video. You're not going to get
No,
better. You're not going to become a professional by listening to, you should watch my videos, right? Because that might get you to, put the foot forward. But it's not enough. It's not enough, right? If
not at
your
all.
buddy would have subscribed to a boat docking YouTube channel and gone to the docking webinar and done all these things, he'd be an expert in watching people dock boats. That's what he
Yes,
would be an expert in. But man, that's such a powerful statement. Learn by doing. Learn by
just doing
doing.
it.
Like,
Get out there and
become it.
do it, and be consistent with it. I mean, that's the only way you get better, right? So, like, one other thing too. That's the other part is identifying the type of business you want to have. But I can tell you, getting on the phone, cold calling, that's the quickest way to get in front of people. Man, it's like pulling teeth to get people to do that.
Oh, yeah.
I do it
It's not
because I
easy.
like to lead by example. So I like for the agents to watch me do that. I do it along my ISAs as well too, so they can see what type of objections, how I'm handling certain objections and things like that. But it's interesting to me that so many people are afraid to get on the phone and just talk to people, just have a conversation with them. Um, you don't get in front of a lot of people, you won't get the opportunities to become that professional.
I love it. I love it. And you don't even know what problems you have to solve, right? You can watch the videos, read the books, you can attend the meetings, the trainings. Getting in front of people and hearing what the problems are now, not what they were a year ago. I think that's where you can actually, add a ton of value and just be aware, that awareness, right? I remember when I was, a brand new agent, my wife told me to do this because she was a more seasoned agent. And I'm like, why am I doing this? She would go, and when a new property was out, she would go look at inventory. Like, she'd go look at properties, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if she didn't have a client for it. Like, I was a buyer agent, right? At the beginning. You got to go and understand a new community would pop up. We didn't have a lot of new construction in my area. So a new community popped up. He goes, you got to go watch it. Got to see it. Got to go take the tour, read the brochure, right? Got to know the inventory because why? Isn't that information online? No, because you have to know it, right? Because
Right.
you've got to tell someone what the difference is between this and something else, right? And the other property that's out there that's available. Like, what is the difference? Like, why? Not what the builder's saying, but you're looking at both. What do you think the difference would be, right? So, yeah, man, it is out there and doing. It is out there and
Yes.
doing, and not kind of sitting back and waiting. It's a really powerful statement. And you touched on a topic, right? Because the prospecting. I know you guys, have been prospecting based. I also know you do great at internet lead generation. So give us the audience some of that red meat. What's working best for you guys right now? What would you say? Because now you're a much more established business than you were a few years ago, Calvin. So maybe like all established businesses, maybe a good chunk of your business is now come list me's. Like, people know you, people get referred to you, you have a bigger presence. Is that a bigger chunk of your business than ever before? Are you guys still making those cold calls? Because that is the first thing agents drop as soon as they can. They stop making calls as soon as humanly possible because, like you said, it's not easy to do, right? It takes a lot of mental fortitude to be consistent with doing that. And that's usually the first thing that goes by the wayside. What's working for you guys right now? What can you share with us? Go for it.
Expireds and FISBOs, man. We do get quite a few come listening, but our bread and butter is expireds and FISBOs. And kind of the one that's going live today, he was an expired. One of the agents called him. Of course, if one of the agents call, I'll just support them, and if they can't get it, I'll call them, and then we'll get it signed, and it goes back to them. But she called, and the guy was like, it was so interesting. He's like, my friend's a realtor. I don't want to talk to anyone else. All this other stuff. And she's like, Calvin, how would you have handled this? And so we talked about it, and I was like, you know what? I want you to just listen to this call. I'm going to call him right now. So I ended up calling him, set in the appointment, went out there. He actually tried to cancel the appointment. And I said, hey, I completely understand. I get it. Just understand, is your goal still to sell the property? He said, yes. I said, well, listen, I get you have that friend. I understand you guys had it on the market before. I'm curious, are you expecting a different result this time around that you didn't get the last time? And he's like, well, hopefully so. I was like, well, did they present a different strategy to you that would cause it to give you a different result this next time around? And he said, no. I said, well, considering this is a large asset, and you ultimately want to get it sold this time, would it make sense just to get a second opinion, just to make sure you're making the right decision? I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen? So he's like, all right, come on out.
Okay, sure. You win.
And again, I believe in listing presentations. We have an awesome listing presentation. Went over that before I even got ready to turn my laptop on. He was like, well, did you bring the paperwork? And I said, no, but I can type it up right now if you want. He's like, yeah, go ahead and type it up and sign it. He signed it right there.
Right there.
And so, but the thing is, there's it again, prospecting would never have the opportunity had she not been prospecting and got in front of the seller. But then also knowing your stuff and then doing things to be consistent. I just mentioned we have a listing presentation. We have a listing presentation, not because I'm not good and I don't know my stuff, but it keeps us consistent.
Yeah.
It keeps us consistent and it helps us make sure that we're hitting on the key points of the things we do differently to get property sold. But yeah, FSBOs and expires, man. That's
bread and butter. Still the bread and butter
all day long. Just calling them.
I love it.
And you know, it works. Fastest source of business opportunity, right? It's what I call
100%. Have you notice more agents competing for those, less agents competing for those, or no real change, in this season?
less because for some reason this is a 1,000-pound gorilla that no one can seem to pick up. We're so scared, even though we're in a sales business. We're so scared to make calls. I would never get it. It's crazy. We'll go nothing towards McDonald's because I love McDonald's. I love Chick-fil-A and all that stuff. But we'll go and work a job making $10 to $12 an hour consistently and harder than we will picking up the phone for 2 hours, 2 hours Monday through Friday, and making 6 figures. 2 hours. That's it. That's minimum, and you're guaranteed to make 6 figures.
Yeah,
isn't that crazy?
It's pretty wild. It's pretty wild, but you know what? I'll add one thing to that, Calvin, because I think a lot of agents, I mean, they understand they have to put in the time, but it's the time and the quality, right? Just getting on the phone for 2 hours a day might not get you that result, right? I mean, actually, it might be surprised. It might get you pretty close anyway, but because like a good chunk of it is just showing up, but the quality of that call, the quality of that conversation, I think matters almost as much as even showing up and making those calls, because your call has to be good. You got to have, because you're dealing with expired and FSBO. They're motivated sellers, they're hand raisers. I mean, that's good, but they have a specific, kind of situation they're going through, right? And you got to be, aware of that, and you got to not beat around the bush, and you got to go right after them, right?
Well, I'm going to agree and disagree with you on that.
Go for it. Go for it.
So the quality of the call does, and anyone who knows me will tell you, my favorite line is the quality of the questions you ask determine the quality of the answers you get, right?
Yeah.
But most important than anything else, is the ritual. The ritual of getting on the phone and being consistent.
The consistency.
Yes. Yeah. If you never master that part,
it doesn't matter how good you are.
Yeah. Greg Harrelson was like influential in me becoming consistent in prospecting. But as he said to someone, I'll never forget this interview he did. That one of the agents came over to his office. It was a seasoned agent before who wasn't doing well, came over, and Greg just said, "Get on the phone." He's like, "Well, who do I call?" He's like, "I don't care, just get on the phone." Get on the phone, because he knew once he was able to develop that consistency of calling, which in most cases it takes 90 days to build up, right? To build up a what is that called? Not process, but to be consistent anyway, to build up a habit. 90 days to build up a habit, right? So that was his main focus. And he's like, you do that, you'll figure out what to say, because you'll have enough conversations to start figuring out how to answer those questions.
You just got to be smart. So I'm coming over to your side. I'm coming over to your side because the quality can come from just practice. The quality can come from practice. I agree with that. Because I've seen, I'm a calling company. I have seen unbelievably talented callers, like great people on the phone, but if they lack that consistency, you're not going to go anywhere. Like, it's just not going to happen. No matter how much talent, and I hate it. I hate to see talent go to waste, but you see it. And that can be a big reason. That can be a really big reason that's going to happen, right? 100%.
Even for the people who have ISAs, because with your company, like you've been That's another part that's been really good with getting quality ISAs, right? But where I see a lot of people fail is because they expect the ISAs to do something that they're not even willing to do themselves.
Yeah.
So that's why, again, I like to get in the trenches with them. So I understand, like when the market shifts, the ISAs are not the agents. They may not know how to handle that, right?
Yeah.
But if you are on the phones with them, even if it's just periodically to understand the challenges they're facing, then you're going to understand the best way to help them overcome that so you guys can keep the ball rolling, right? So I see a lot of people fail with ISAs because they're expecting them to do something they're not willing to do themselves. And unfortunately,
100%. Yeah, and and actually, your example, the one you gave of one of your agents making the call, I think, and their agent basically made some calls, found a motivated seller, found someone that but they couldn't bring him over the hump. They handed him off to you, and you got it to the finish line, right? That was an agent, not an ISA. I think that's the ISA's job. Identify the motivated seller, identify the opportunity, and hand it off to you to take it to the finish line. I think that's a great description of, and we're talking about specifically cold calling. I'll put it another way, Calvin. I've never seen a cold calling campaign work that doesn't do that.
Yes.
Right? Because the agents want some agents will go approach it with the expectation that they'll come list me. Like they're going to find these expired in FSBO and they're going to hand off these appointments and they're just going to go basically sign the listing agreement. It's just never going to happen. It's just a very unrealistic expectation.
100%. To your point, the reality of it is, and that's the other part too, the misconception that the ISAs are supposed to set you, like you just said, these come list me calls. They're supposed to set you opportunities. And the reason they do that is because if you look at the amount of people who are registering on these websites, the amount of leads coming in right now, if you look at it back prior to 2012, that's probably very equal to the amount of people buying. The people looking was equal to the amount of people purchasing or selling or doing something real estate related. Now you've got to go through, we've got almost 80,000 people in our database. You've got to go through tons of people to find those opportunities, to find those needles in a haystack. And that's primarily what the ISAs do, is they sort through, they sift that sand so you get the little gold nuggets, and then it's your job to convert those gold nuggets. Now, every now and then you may get an ISA who's just really, really good and may be able to set those appointments, but I see that a lot too, where I'll go back and I'll listen to some of the phone calls. I'm like, man, that's such a great opportunity. That's such a great opportunity. But then the agent's complaining because they didn't have the skill set to convert that opportunity. And they want to blame the ISA. When the reality is, because I'm looking at everything from a 30,000 foot view, it's actually the agent, not the ISA. The ISA did their job and sorted through those 500 leads that were in there to get you that one opportunity because you weren't willing to do it yourself.
100%. I think that's where the ISA adds the most value. Going through that, like you said, hundreds of iterations to give that one opportunity. Because as an agent, that's what you want. You want to have a pipeline, not of transaction ready clients. That's not really a thing. Let's be honest. When you're talking about internet prospecting, outbound prospecting, they're not transaction ready clients. It doesn't exist, right? That not really. It's opportunities. It's opportunities, and those opportunities can be. I understand you can fail on that conversion. It doesn't mean that wasn't an opportunity, right? You might fail to get them to work with you. You might fail to get them to list now, to buy now. Understandable, but that's an at bat, right? No one bats 1,000, right? If you take enough at bats, no one bats 1,000. But April 1st, a lot of people are batting 1,000 or batting 800, 900. Sure, you're in the business long enough, you're going to hit the average. But you want to hit 300. That's 1 out of 3, right? Talk to 3 motivated sellers, like potential sellers, and you get one of them, you can be one of the best in the industry, right? But actually, forget 300, 250. You have the 4 motivated sellers to get one on the list with you. You're an amazing agent, right? But you got to understand those numbers. You got to understand those numbers, and adding leverage to that equation you can't abdicate that responsibility. I don't think, and I'll think it this way. I've never seen it work. And I would know if you can find such a talented ISA that, man, maybe it's a needle in the haystack. It's possible. But at scale, never going to happen. At scale, never going to happen. You've got to adapt to that model. Our good friend, John D. Smith, calls it shaking the tree. ISA shakes the tree. If you don't understand that, you probably shouldn't get an ISA, right? Because that's what they're going to do. they're not going to pick up and chew the fruit for you, right? They're gonna
Right.
shake that tree and
Right.
find people that are you can have a conversation with, and it's up to you to move them to the next step, right?
Oh, and the other part of it is too is the transparency of keeping your database organized. They also that's another huge thing. You think, like I
Gotcha.
said, with 80,000 people in here,
Wow.
if I'm on appointments all day, or like some of the agents, and we're not in the database keeping it organized, we're missing a lot of opportunity. They're not only sifting to find those opportunities in it, but they're also cleaning up and organizing, putting people in the right place. You may get someone who's down the road 6 months from now, so we're going to put them in that warm pipeline, right? And then they're making sure that we're following up with them. They're doing so much more than what we just focused on, which is that, oh, I didn't get a good appointment. There's so much more
Gotcha.
value to them than just sitting the opportunity when you consider organizing your database and putting people in the right place and making sure follow-up is happening, because we are the worst in the industry with follow-up.
Oh yeah,
The
very
worst in the
easily,
industry. So it's
easily.
just, I think a lot of agents just kind of miss the mark with it because they don't see the bigger picture. They only see the
Got it.
one thing, which love that book in the background, back behind you.
Say the one. Say the one.
Yeah,
I said, well, over here, over here. There
that
we go.
one, yeah,
Okay.
the one thing, yeah, yeah. But they, as opposed to seeing the overall goal and the usefulness of the ISA, which is find you the opportunities, keep your database organized, and make sure follow up is happening.
I love it. I love it. Awesome. Well, Calvin, I know you're a busy guy. Thank you so much for being gracious with your time. If people, want to learn more about you, want to continue the conversation in some capacity, what's the best way to find you, Calvin?
You can call my office or send me an email. The office number is 423-381-6522. And my email is calvin@chattanoogapremierhomes.com.
All right. Awesome. That's great. I love it. Calvin,
Thank you.
thanks so much, man. Always a great conversation with you. You're very thoughtful, very intentional about how you run your team and how you do work with your clients. It's great. I think we're going to get a lot of this, a lot of really great nuggets in this conversation. You guys should rewatch this on slow. Don't put it on 2 times. Slow it down, and catch some of the nuggets. Calvin, thank you so much, man.
Yes, sir. Thank you.